darlings. Welcome to First Contact Radio. How you doing today? Welcome to the show. Let's jump into the cosmic weather. Starting off at spaceweather.com. Our current conditions show us that solar wind is blowing at 401 kilometers per second, a bit less than it was yesterday. And our planetary K index has lessened. It went from a 2 back down to a 1, and that 4 that was expected is no longer. Our chance for an M-class flare is very low, only a 1% chance, and therefore only a 1% chance of an X-class flare. And the geomagnetic storm possibilities are very low as well, only 30% in the mid-latitudes, a little bit higher, 40% in the higher latitudes, which means chances for auroras. Alright, now, if you're looking up at the sky tonight, Mars is approaching Earth for a closer encounter in March. Start looking for the red planet now. Tonight is shining brighter than a first magnitude star besides the waning full moon. So be able to check that out tonight. And of course, as I just mentioned, auroras. We got the Aurora Watch. Medium speed solar wind is blowing past Earth and sparking auroras around the Arctic Circle. So you may see something up in the sky. Get your camera ready. Might be kind of cool. Planet-wise, we are still dealing with the conscious sign of the sun sign, which deals with our consciousness, of a water, which is Aquarius, the water bearer. And today we have moved into a sign. Remember, yesterday we were between signs. Now today our moon, which represents the unconscious, is completely over into Virgo. Virgo is the analytical sign, analyzes, it's practical. It's an earth sign, so we have the element of water for the conscious mind, and the unconscious mind is earth. So look at those two ideas and see how they mash together in the world today, and not only in the world around you, but how it affects your life. And as you look at things in this way, you'll be able to see that if you break things down to their basics, fire, water, air, and earth, the elements, you can kind of understand. So today we're working with the sun element of water and the moon element of earth. Our current moon phase now, it's on its way back down to a new moon. We're at 96% full. If you're getting a chance to get out and see the moon at night, it looks really awesome. A lot of clouds around it. It gives it an interesting, cool look. And you can kind of also see the little halo around it because of all the ice crystals and coldness and so on and so forth. On the dream spell, today is a yellow solar human. A solar tone is tone number 9. The bar represents 5. The dot represents 1. So we got a 5 plus 4, it's 9. So today, our day kin for today is the human. The guide for today is the star. And then we have the 3 energies that support it, which is the wind, the hand, and the moon. The phrase for today, because every day has a phrase according to these symbols, the phrase is, I pulse in order to influence realizing wisdom. I seal the process of free will with the solar tone of intention. I am guided by the power of elegance. And again, today is a galactic activation portal day. Now on the Gregorian calendar, it is February 9th, 2012. So there you have it. That catches you up to speed on our cosmic weather for today. The whole idea, again, is to be able to understand what's going on energetically around you, because everything is energy. If you understand how the energy is moving around you, or even that it's there, you might have an opportunity then to make better use of it in your life. And if you can make better use of it, good. That's a good thing. Alright, we're going to move on to our first story of the day. This first story comes to us, it's a report that was done by RT and has to do with Hollywood and how the Pentagon is actually involved in the movie making process. Maybe you didn't know that, but you do now. Hollywood is definitely involved in the process of making movies, especially the Pentagon, as you're about to hear. Alright, so let's check that out. I'll be back.
Does not seem to have brought us any closer to ending the global war on terror. But it does seem to have given Hollywood plenty of fodder for yet another rah-rah military Hollywood film. And the same team that's behind the Hurt Locker movie is scheduled to release another flick on the raid of the Bin Laden raid, the famous SEAL Team 6 Bin Laden raid, right before the presidential election. And surprise, surprise, a Republican congressman is up in arms. Now, the head of the House Homeland Security Committee, Peter King, is furious because he heard somewhere that the White House may be shipping Xerox copies of all of its national security secrets to Hollywood or something like that. Now, according to King, it's propaganda that is worthy of an official congressional investigation. And of course, as expected, the conflict is playing out all over the mainstream press. Now, pardon the pun, but something definitely seems to be wrong with this picture. Seemingly countless wars, seemingly countless casualties, and this is the issue that's breathlessly reported by the press. There's a bigger issue at hand here that has very little to do with politics, Democrats and Republicans, and everything to do with the failure of the press. And that is, according to radio host David Sirota. He's the author of Back to Our Future, How the 1980s Explain the World We Live in Now, and he spoke to me earlier today. Take a look.
What Peter King's criticism really brings up is, and granted, he doesn't come at this from a principled position, as you say, he comes at it from a partisan position, but what this brings up is the larger collusion between Hollywood and the Pentagon that gets almost no coverage, almost no scrutiny. And so what we have here is, perhaps inadvertently, because of a serendipitous alignment of partisan interests, we have perhaps the opportunity to look more deeply at that collusion between the Pentagon and Hollywood and how that collusion really works. And it's worked this way for decades, although it really went on steroids in the 1980s, is that the Pentagon and the larger U.S. national security apparatus grants and denies access to military hardware, military boats, military planes, military information. It grants and denies that access to that information based on whether a filmmaker is prepared to make a pro-war, pro-Pentagon, a pro-government movie, or an anti-war, or a highly critical piece of filmmaking. So literally, quite literally, the Pentagon, and it's very open about this, the Pentagon will line edit screenwriters' scripts that are about the military if those screenwriters and the studios want to have access to be able to, let's say, photograph planes or tanks or aircraft carriers. The best example of this, of course, is the movie Top Gun. Top Gun was granted a huge amount of access to the military's planes at taxpayer-subsidized rates because the filmmakers of that movie submitted their script to Pentagon editors for the Pentagon to line edit it to make sure it was perfectly mimicking what the Pentagon wanted the movie to say.
But
now,
David,
this is a tax... Go ahead.
Just sorry to interrupt you, but I have to play devil's advocate here. I mean, you know, the Pentagon is an institution that is tasked with protecting the United States. It is in its best interest to do whatever is necessary in order to do that, and that includes getting people to be interested in signing up for it, because remember, we have an all-volunteer military force. So what's wrong with that? I mean, it's in the Pentagon's interest to show its wars, to show itself in a positive light. Why should the military be expected to grant access to some anti-military filmmaker?
Well, I have no problem with the Pentagon promoting its message affirmatively. That is, Pentagon advertisements that it pays for, Pentagon press releases. That's promoting itself affirmatively. And the Pentagon is going to do that. It has to do that. And I have no problem with it. What I have a problem with is material and hardware that is inherently public property. The Pentagon does not own that tank. The Pentagon does not exclusively own that plane. We as taxpayers all own that. The Pentagon thereby denying or selectively denying access to that based on what a journalist or a filmmaker wants to do with that information, based on the content, based on the ideology, based on the politics of the journalist who wants to cover the Pentagon. That is a use of government power that frankly tramples the First Amendment. That's saying that this public property can only be seen or only be used by people who want to mimic the Pentagon's precise line. That's a different story than the Pentagon simply promoting itself.
And then, you know, as you say, of course, the Pentagon isn't expected to necessarily put itself in any sort of negative light, but that's why we have the press. The press is supposed to uncover all of this, to show wars as they really are. You know, even if young kids are watching Hollywood films and see wars as some non-dangerous, exciting, fun adventure, they can turn on the evening news and see that war is actually a bloody, dangerous mess, right?
Well, that's absolutely true, except we live in a world where young people are getting their views of politics and the world around them, both from the entertainment world and from the news world. I mean, they've crisscrossed, and we know now that that's where kids and that's where the country really gets its views about the military and the war. And here's how this collusion between Hollywood and the Pentagon has really changed the marketplace of the way we get information. Because the Pentagon's granting of access to filmmakers comes with it an implicit tax subsidy. I think the number was, it cost Top Gun all of $2 million to use all of those scenes of planes. That's an inherent taxpayer subsidy. What has ultimately happened is that Hollywood studios have said to screenwriters quite publicly, if your screenplay cannot get the acceptance of the Pentagon, then we financially are not in a place to be able to make your movie. So this is why for every one anti-war or Pentagon-critical movie that is ultimately made, you have dozens of blockbusters that glorify or don't ask questions about American militarism, because this subsidy has changed the very financial dynamics of the entertainment marketplace.
Now, there's an ad that I want to play for you that I know you've talked about before that I think illustrates your point probably a little bit better than us talking about it. Will, let's see if we have that clip.
Heroes. Ordinary people who discover they can do extraordinary things. With unique talents and strengths, they stand together as an elite class. It's more than a uniform. It's a chance to be part of something bigger than you ever imagined. Try it on at facebook.com/GoArmy and see exclusive content for X-Men First Class. Only in theaters June 3rd. There's strong, and then there's Army strong.
Now, a kid watching this, how do you think that affects a young American child who sees this, who might love the X-Men?
Well, first of all, it's obviously designed to sell kids on the military, sell the military experience as something that's not all that dangerous, that's very exciting, to sell the idea of being a soldier as safe as being a superhero. So there's a propaganda, I think, problem with it in that it's not honest. Now, you can't expect the Pentagon to air ads actively promoting itself saying the war is hell, for instance.
Of course. But can't we expect journalists to perhaps highlight this? I mean, I was doing quite a bit of research before we did this interview, and one thing that struck me is that there really aren't a lot of stories about this. The New York Times ran something over the summer when this came out, but why do you think there isn't a lot of coverage about this collusion, as you call it, in the press?
Because it serves the financial interests of two of the most powerful financial actors in the American economy. Obviously the Pentagon, and then the larger entertainment industry. The Pentagon using and effectively subsidizing the entertainment industry creates a vested interest for the entertainment industry, which of course in many cases owns news organizations. It creates a vested interest for those news organizations not to call this into question.
Mm-hmm. Now, one very focused question on the press that I want to ask about. We all remember, of course, the Bush administration banning any journalists from taking photographs of the flag-draped coffins. President Obama was at the ceremony just yesterday, not celebrating, but commemorating, I guess, the death of the returns of the remains of the 30 or so soldiers who were killed in a recent Afghanistan air raid. This photo, and I think we have it, stirred quite a bit of controversy. Now, David, I know you can't see it from where you are, but it's just black outlines of the president saluting. You don't see any remains, nothing at all. Completely sensitized photo. This photo has been a cause for complete controversy. Yet the underlying reasons beyond the war, the underlying issues surrounding the war, the actual war coverage has not been a source of controversy. What is wrong with the media picture here?
Well, the issue is that this is a controversy, and it's absurd that it's a controversy, but it's a controversy in a country that wants to hide everything about the real-world consequences of war. Showing a picture of the silhouette of the president saluting, the idea that that's controversial is only a reflection on a larger culture that hasn't been willing to look at the real consequences of war. It's even more controversial to show flag-draped coffins, even though we don't know who's in the exact identity of who's in those coffins. And it's even more controversial just to show what actually happens on the battlefield. There was a big controversy a couple of years ago when the Associated Press published one single photo of a soldier who had been injured on the battlefield. This was cause for outrage when in fact it should have been cause for, not for celebration, certainly it was a horrifying photo, but cause for us to rethink what we are actually doing in these wars. And that's what is attempted to be hidden in all of this, is that we don't want to look at the blood and guts consequences of war.
Well, David, thank you so much for your time, and I hear your child presumably crying in the background there. I hope that work like yours and others who have been exposing this issue will perhaps guarantee that in the future there will be a little bit more of a separation between our armed forces and how we entertain ourselves. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
This is the UFO News with Joshua Poet.
Thank you, Dirk. Here's the UFO news for today. I have several stories. First one comes to us here from the International Space Station. February 8th, 2012, UFO near International Space Station caught on live cam. Okay, this is the image we're going to be seeing. This is a great capture by StreetCap1 of YouTube. He is notorious for watching day and night the International Space Station live cam and recording it. Here is another fantastic capture near the ISS yesterday. Why are UFOs near the ISS so important? Because if it was space junk, the ISS would have declared it and prepared to move the ISS or ready ejection pods just in case they did last month. However, none of that happened, and this object went unreported by NASA to the public. StreetCap1 is on NASA like a duck on a June bug. Here we go. Let's take a look at what this is all about. Alright, there we go. There's the ISS, and there's an object in question. Look at that. Little gray object. Alright, you can see it moving from right to left. Alright, this was shot 4 minutes earlier. There you go, you can see the object way out there in the distance. Alright, and as we move a little closer, see it's still out there. Alright, so UFOs out by the ISS. Check out the video, check out the story. UFO News link on the right hand side of our page at firstcontactradio.com. Now, from Educating Humanity, we have the story of UFOs over Seattle. A new kind of UFO, triangular in shape, has been spooking the community, and a new sighting made it onto YouTube. This from Seattle, Washington. The video below shows the unidentified flying object or objects over a quiet cul-de-sac as neighbors walk past and comment on the strange sight. In the video, the points of the triangle are clearly defined and stay relatively aligned as the shape elongates and folds over itself. Suddenly, one of the lights winks on and off. The witness making the video gets a little profane in the description and doesn't help the cause by adding a rap video soundtrack along with some self-promoting graphics. But it doesn't change the high quality of the sighting and clearly shows a fine example of the most recent type of UFO incident. In these reports, the brightly lit object glides across the sky without making a sound. The edges of this triangle stay in perfect geometric proportion to each other at all times, something pilots find very difficult to maintain, if not impossible. Sometimes one or more of the corner lights wink on or off. That's something else pilots never do, especially at night. Alright, let's check this out. Minus the music and the commentary. Alright, there we go. We got the object in the distance there. Zip through it. Yeah, 2, 3 objects forming a triangle. Now we can imagine that this might be one solid triangular object here. Alright, very interesting. Alright, so I'm going to leave that for you to decipher a little more. You can blow up the picture. Really check it out good. Next story comes to us from Roger Marsh over at Examiner.com. Hovering lights over Virginia Mountain reported moving to ground level. A Virginia witness reports the third case of a single bright white light that hovers about 75 feet above a local mountain and then slowly descends below the tree line and disappears, according to February 8, 2012 testimony from Mutual UFO Network Witness Reporting Database. All 3 observations occurred between February 2nd and 6, 2012, although the town name is not mentioned in the public portion of the report. Sometimes they appear higher, lower in the sky, but always display the same pattern of being stationary with constant light and slow descents, the witness stated. The placement of the sighted lights has been variable, sometimes visible at a higher point on the slope of the mountain. No images or video included with this report. All right, moving from Virginia to Texas. Texas couple follows UFO as it moves over El Paso area. A Texas couple driving near El Paso report watching a silent, bright light and following it after the object could not be identified, according to February 8, 2012 testimony from the Mutual UFO Network Witness Reporting Database. We are driving around town in the Lower Valley area, the reporting witness stated. I looked up at the sky because I had seen a bright light, and then I realized the aircraft was still there. I thought it was a helicopter, so we drove closer to the residential area and lowered the windows to see if it made any sound. The craft was hovering, silently eerie. The object seemed to be moving towards Las Cruces, New Mexico. We decided to drive in the direction of the craft. We noticed one other car who stopped on the side of the road to look at the object. We kept following, but it seemed to be moving fast. We were going around 40 miles per hour. We followed it all the way through downtown El Paso. It seemed to be flying in between the border of El Paso and Juarez. The couple could not identify the object. The boyfriend was a retired military, and he strongly believed that he couldn't have been a military craft, let alone a helicopter, since he had been in various Blackhawks before. We lost sight of the object due to traffic, and the fact that it kept going was a steady pace west. There are no images or videos. And last story for today for the UFO news. This has to do with these metal boxes along the coastal beaches. Now there's more of them. UFO sightings reveal more strange metal boxes along coastal beaches. Okay, this is the box. Says they can't be moved even when yanked by a four-wheel drive truck pulling on heavy chains tied around the humming metal boxes that are still appearing as of February 8th up and down West Coast beaches. As of late afternoon, February 8th, Bill Ham-Schumacher, a public marine specialist and Ph.D., Doctor of Marine Science at the Hatfield Marine Science Center in nearby Newport, told Hewlett in an interview that I don't know what they are. In turn, Dr. Hans Schumacher said he advised surf monitoring about these strange metal boxes that suddenly appeared along the local beaches February 6th and now seem to be multiplying like Star Trek tribbles. The photograph that accompanies the report, taken during the afternoon of February 8th near Brace Point, yet another strange metal box stuck in the surf, is one of a possible group of a dozen or more that have been sighted up and down the West Coast beaches. Meanwhile, the British government also photographed similar huge metal boxes on beaches in Sri Lanka in the late 90s and the early 2004 and 2005. The discovery of the boxes is detailed in previously updated classified reports from the British government that document sightings of unidentified flying objects by both military and the general public dating back to the 50s. Thus, within these British government UFO files available via the internet, there are the Sri Lanka beach boxes that are similar in both size, color, and shape, with locals all along Sri Lanka beaches, located in the blue waters of the Indian Ocean and the Bay of Bengal, stating in the recently released British UFO documents that the strange metal boxes appeared suddenly and after numerous UFO sightings. In turn, the metal boxes along Oregon, Washington State, and Northern Carolina beaches are now being photographed, documented, and examined by local experts. Also, due to the recent storms out in the Pacific Ocean, the boxes are being more or less ignored, with passing comments in local coastal newspapers. Say Errol, a Braid Point local, a member of the Oregon UFO Watchers group that gathers both here and at nearby Stonefield Beach to scan the sky for flying objects in much the same way bird watchers use binoculars for bird watching. It goes on to say, Errol notes it's always a sort of communication breakdown that always seems to go the same way, be it a UFO sighting or even something like these humming metal boxes. However, Errol said it's a good thing when something like this becomes interesting to the Oregon State University research agenda. For instance, Dr. Hans Schumacher works for the OSU Research Enterprise at the nearby Hatfield Marine Science Center in Newport, Oregon. Whenever there's some dead sea life, such as beach whale or something along the lines of massive seabirds, the experts at the Hatfield are called in to investigate. When asked if he's ever heard of anything like these huge metal boxes with no opening or seam, Dr. Hans Schumacher would not comment or speculate on the record. Instead, the marine science expert for the photos of the boxes and size and coloring details. In turn, Dr. Hans Schumacher would not speculate about the various rumors regarding the boxes, but said that an alert has gone out and the boxes are being investigated. Of course, Hulick will continue to monitor this breaking news that the local coastal residents and visitors scratching their heads about the boxes. Very interesting indeed. One more look at these boxes. And again, they're saying they can't be moved, even when yanked by a four-wheel drive truck pulling on heavy chains and humming metal boxes that are appearing. So, very, very interesting indeed. We're going to keep an eye on this to see what transpires. I'm going to jump away to a song. I'll be right back. I got more news. Stay tuned.
What if our government was responsible for some of the greatest crimes against this nation? Would you really want to know? These are big questions, but these questions deserve answers. It's time to demand the truth.
People should not be afraid of their governments. Governments should be afraid of them.
9/11 was an inside job. Kennedy was killed by the CIA. Jimmy Carter saw UFO. Answers to secrets you need to know. So wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. The evidence is overwhelming. Step past your fear, take a look. Illuminati lies keep growing, but they're illusion from your eyes. And wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. What would our founding fathers say if they were alive today? Must be turning in their graves. Redcoats are coming, big brother's watching. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. What if I land and two if I see? And I on the opposite shore will be ready to ride and spread the alarm through every Middlesex village and farm. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. When a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Patriots arise. It's time to demand the truth.
All right. Continuing on. Our next story comes to us from the economic collapse blog.com. 10 things every American should know about the Federal Reserve. This is very important. What would happen if the Federal Reserve was shut down permanently? That is a question that CNBC asked recently, but unfortunately most Americans don't really think about the Fed that much. Most Americans are content with believing that the Federal Reserve is just another stuffy government agency that sets our interest rates and is watching out for the best interest of the American people. But that is not the case at all. The truth is that the Federal Reserve is a private banking cartel that has been designed to systematically destroy the value of our currency, drain the wealth of the American public, and enslave the federal government to perpetually expanding debt. During this election year, the economy is number one issue that voters are concerned about. But instead of endlessly blaming both political parties, the truth is that most of the blame should be placed at the feet of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve has more power over the performance of the U.S. economy than anyone else does. The Federal Reserve controls the money supply, the Federal Reserve sets the interest rates, and the Federal Reserve hands out bailouts to the big banks that absolutely dwarfs anything Congress ever did. If the American people are ever going to learn what is really going on with our economy, then it is absolutely imperative that they get educated about the Federal Reserve. The following are 10 things every American should know about the Federal Reserve. 1. The Federal Reserve System is a privately owned banking cartel. It is not a government agency. The truth is that it is a privately owned central bank. It is owned by the banks that are members of the Federal Reserve System. We do not know how much the system each bank owns because it has never been disclosed to the American people. The Federal Reserve openly admits it is privately owned. When it was defending itself against a Bloomberg request for information under the Freedom of Information Act, the Federal Reserve stated equivocally in court that it was not an agency of the federal government and therefore not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. In fact, if you want to find out what the Federal Reserve System is owned by the member banks, all you have to do is go to the Federal Reserve website. And this is an excerpt from there. The 12 regional Federal Reserve banks, which were established by Congress as the operating arms of the nation's central banking system, are organized much like private corporations, possibly leading to some confusion about ownership. For example, the Reserve Banks issue shares of stock to member banks. However, owning Reserve Bank stock is quite different from owning stock in a private company. The Reserve Banks are not operated for profit and ownership of a certain amount of stock. By law, a condition of membership in the system. The stock may not be sold, traded, or pledged as a security for a loan. Dividends, by law, 6% per year. Foreign government and foreign banks that do not own significant ownership interest in member banks that own the Federal Reserve System. So it would be accurate to say that the Federal Reserve is partially foreign owned. But until the exact ownership shares of the Federal Reserve are revealed, we will never know to what extent the Fed is foreign owned. Next, the Federal Reserve System is a perpetual debt machine. As long as the Federal Reserve exists, U.S. government debt will continue to up and up and up. The next point. The Federal Reserve has destroyed more than 96% of the value of the U.S. dollar. Did you know that the U.S. dollar has lost 96.2% of its value since 1900? Of course, almost all of that decline has happened since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913. Because the money supply is designed to expand constantly, it is guaranteed that all of our dollars will constantly lose value. Next, the Federal Reserve can bail out whoever it wants with no accountability. The American people got so upset about the bailouts that Congress gave to the Wall Street banks and to the big automakers. But did you know that the biggest bailouts of all were given out by the Federal Reserve? Thanks to a very limited audit of the Federal Reserve that Congress approved a while back, we learned that the Fed made trillions of dollars in secret bailout loans to big Wall Street banks during the last financial crisis. They even secretly loaned out hundreds of billions of dollars to foreign banks. According to the results of the limited Fed audit mentioned above, the total of $16 trillion in secret loans were made by the Federal Reserve between December 2007 and July 21st, 2010. Continue. The fifth point, the Federal Reserve is paying banks not to lend money. Did you know that the Federal Reserve is actually paying banks to not make loans? True. Section 128 of the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act of 2008 allows the Federal Reserve to pay interest on excess reserves that U.S. banks park at the Fed. So the banks can just send their cash to the Fed and watch the money come rolling in, risk-free. Next. Part 6, number 6, the Federal Reserve creates artificial economic bubbles that are extremely damaging. By allowing a centralized authority such as the Federal Reserve to dictate interest rates, it creates an environment where financial bubbles can be created very easily. Next, 7, the Federal Reserve System is dominated by the big Wall Street banks. Even since it was created, the Federal Reserve System has been dominated by the big Wall Street banks. The following is from a previous article that was done about the Fed. Goes on to say, the New York representative is the only permanent member of the Federal Open Market Committee, while other regional banks rotate in 2 to 3 year intervals. The former head of the New York Fed, Timothy Geithner, is now U.S. Treasury Secretary. The truth is that the Federal Reserve Bank of New York has always been the most important of the regional Fed banks by far, and in turn, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York has always been dominated by Wall Street and the major New York banks. Number 8. It is not an accident that we saw the personal income tax and the Federal Reserve System both come into existence in 1913. That's right, on February 3rd, 1913, the 16th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution was ratified. Later that year, the United States Revenue Act of 1913 imposed a personal income tax on American people, and we have had one ever since. Without a personal income tax, it's hard to have a central bank. It takes a lot of money to finance all the government debt that a central bank system creates. It is also no accident the 16th Amendment was ratified in 1913 and the Federal Reserve System was also created. Now, in regards to the 16th Amendment, there is question whether that was properly ratified or not, but that is a whole nother kettle of worms. Now, the next one, point number 9. The current Federal Reserve Chairman, Ben Bernanke, has a nightmarish track record of incompetence. The mainstream media portrays Federal Chairman Ben Bernanke as a brilliant economics, but is that really the case? Let's go to the videotapes. Now, here we got some videos showing. We already know what kind of guy Ben Bernanke is. He's not an honest person at all. Next, we have the last point. The Federal Reserve has become way too powerful. It is the most undemocratic institution in America. It has become so powerful that it is now known as the fourth branch of government, and there are less checks and balances on the Fed than there are in any of the other 3 branches. The Federal Reserve runs the U.S. economy, but is not accountable to the American people. We can't vote those that run the Fed out of office, and if we do not like what they do. Yes, the presidents appoint those that run the Fed, but he also knows that if he does not tread lightly, he won't get the money from the big Wall Street banks that he needs for the next election. Thankfully, there are a few members of Congress that are complaining about how much power the Fed have. For example, Ron Paul once told MSNBC that he believes that the Federal Reserve is now actually more powerful than Congress. So, very important things to know about the Federal Reserve. They have been ripping off Americans for a long time, and not just Americans, but people all around the world, ripping them off. So, keep thinking the Fed is your buddy, and he'll keep stealing from you. That's what they do. They steal from you, and most of you just smile and say, hey, take some more. Now, moving right along, this is about Ron Paul. And this is Ron Paul surges to second nationally. This is another RT report. Let's check this out. See what's going on here. Here we go.
To be the next Republican presidential candidate has shaken up. This after Rick Santorum swept all 3 states in last night's primaries. Now Mitt Romney's cozy spot as frontrunner isn't so certain anymore. Throughout the race, various candidates enjoyed their time in the limelight, only to be taken over by a new GOP flavor of the week. But one candidate's popularity has remained consistent, Ron Paul, and there are signs that he is gaining momentum, especially after coming in second in Minnesota, where he beat Romney and Gingrich. And take a look at this poll. According to the latest telephone polls coming out, frontrunner Mitt Romney lost some ground in recent days, dropping from 30 to 29%. Ron Paul is now in second place nationally. His support grew 5%, putting him at 21%, and rounding out the bunch, Newt Gingrich's support fell by 1% to 19%. And Rick Santorum's support rose by 5 to 18%. So, with support for the other candidates slipping, is it Ron Paul's time to shine? Well, to dig deeper into this, I spoke with volunteer organizer and Ron Paul supporter Mary Willison earlier from Los Angeles. I asked her if Mitt Romney is still the front runner. Take a look.
No, we're really happy with how Ron Paul is steadily pulling forward, and we have a lot of faith in the strategy of his campaign, and that as he gains ground in each one of these caucuses and moves into the primary states, we are gaining momentum, we're gaining more supporters, and there's a strategy to it. So, you know, we're excited that he's not the flavor of the month. He's never had a bad race. You know, he's pulling forward.
And so now Ron Paul, he has yet to win a caucus, but as you just said, he seems to be the only one that is steadily on the upswing. He's got a very loyal following, while the others kind of come up and down. So with Romney, the traditionally seen as the front runner, losing speed, is right now Ron Paul's time to shine?
I believe that it is Ron Paul's time to shine, but I'm perfectly happy with him plugging away and just keep going towards the Tampa convention. So if I don't see, I mean, it would be wonderful to win one, you know, that would be really exciting right now. But as I understand it, in Minnesota, he pulled in more delegates, even in counties where Mitt Romney, in counties where Santorum was in first place, Ron Paul got most of the delegates. So people showed up, and they're going forward in the caucuses to vote for Ron Paul.
And, you know, last night, obviously, a huge victory for Santorum after he won all three states. So he's proving to be this more conservative alternative to Romney, who's his critics call the Massachusetts moderate. So we are seeing this divide within the Republican Party, but Ron Paul's followers are the most passionate, most loyal. So what does this divide within the party mean for Ron Paul's campaign?
I think that the votes that are going to Santorum and Newt Gingrich currently are not being taken from, they're not coming from Ron Paul's base. They're just dipping into Mitt Romney's voter pool. And we already know that Newt Gingrich and Rick Santorum are not on the ballot in multiple states where they were not able to collect enough signatures to get on the ballot. They didn't have enough of the foresight to plan their campaigns. And in order to win with, I think it's 1,144 delegates, you know, they're not eligible for between 5 and 6 states, each of them. So, you know, a vote for Newt Gingrich and for Santorum is probably a wasted vote unless we're going to have a brokered convention, which, you know, I don't know about that, how it's going to pan out, but I'm sure that Ron Paul is gaining delegates as we go along.
And, you know, the fact that he is gaining momentum and that he has made it this far is a huge improvement from the last time he was running for the last election. So would you say that Ron Paul's image as a fringe candidate has changed?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's so much more support now. There's so much more awareness. I didn't know about Ron Paul in the last election. I was living overseas, and I was, you know, excited about the hope and change that Obama was talking about, and I don't really subscribe to a party particularly per se. I'm, you know, very much want to support the things that matter to me and what I think matter to the country as a whole. I think that the political divide that we have, this is a, you know, Democrats and Republicans, it's a horse and pony show, and I think that right now a lot of people are willing to cross the political divide and register themselves as a Republican, you know, in order to take part in this, and that's what Ron Paul has. A lot of people are joining the Republican Party because, you know what, if you can't beat them, join them, and get, you know, you have a lot more chance of making the change that you want to see in the world by taking part, getting in there and being active. So, I mean, I do lean more conservatively. I'm fiscally conservative. You know, I don't want wars, though, so on that side I'm very much different from the other GOP candidates. I think that the whole GOP is changing. We are the new voice, the new generation, and people, I encourage them, no matter if they're liberal, democratic, libertarian, whatever, independent, to go ahead and, you know, make a difference. If you could, you know, do some research and become aware of Ron Paul's policies and ideas and the change that he's trying to make. I mean, he is the only one talking about restoring our currency or competing currencies, auditing the Fed. These banks that have been bailed out, the money is vanishing. If you take MF Global, for example, you know, money is vaporizing, and I think that they're setting a stage for something like that to happen here, and nobody else is even talking about it. Ron Paul is the only one who is willing to shine a light into the dark corners of our political parties and these big corporations who are running the show, and people are awakening to it and deciding that they can take part and make the difference. So.
And lastly, Mary, just want to ask you, Ron Paul, we see he is gaining some momentum. How can he continue to attract more voters? We are seeing that he's winning some people over from the mainstream, and he does have his loyal base. How can he continue to take advantage of this leverage?
Well, everyone who does some research and gets involved and understands the policies usually gets profoundly moved by them and wants to be active in this and wants to make a difference. So I encourage everyone who does come along and decide to support Ron Paul to talk to your grandparents, talk to your neighbors, talk to your cousins and aunts and uncles, co-workers, everyone. You need to start raising the issues and have little political discussions. It doesn't always have to be a debate. You know, people like to call us Paul bots because, you know, this is such an important conversation to be having. We're talking about the future of our country and our impact on the world. So, you know, I encourage everybody to get registered as a Republican so that you have a choice when it's time for, you know, the GOP primary candidate to go against Obama. You know, people are trying to say the conservative or the anti-Romney. Come on. They're it's a joke to me.
I can tell you are certainly a huge Paul fan, and thank you so much for coming on the show. That was volunteer organizer and Ron Paul supporter, Mary Wilson.
All right, continuing on now. Next story here. This is comes to us from the Slate.com. Check this out. Ron Paul secretly won the caucuses. They all laughed at Ron Paul. They all laughed when he took the stage in Minnesota, having come in a solid second place, and reminded the faithful of a little thing called delegates. They were serious about it. Paul believed that they understood the delegate process and that the media does not. The truth is here. The delegate process is confusing, and I assume that Paul supporters have used it for their 4 years of organizing and studying it in a fruitful manner. In an email to supporters, they try to get granular about what's occurring. We are confident in gaining a much larger share of delegates than even our impressive showing yesterday indicates. As an example of our campaign delegate strength, take a look at what has occurred in Colorado. In one precinct, Lamar County, the straw poll vote was 23 for Santorum, 13 for Paul, 5 for Romney, 2 for Gingrich. There were 13 delegate slots. Ron Paul got all 13. In a precinct in Delta County, the vote was 22 for Santorum, 12 for Romney, 8 for Paul, 7 for Gingrich. There were 5 delegate slots. All 5 went to Ron Paul. In Pueblo County Precinct, the vote was for 16 for Santorum, 11 Romney, 3 for Gingrich, 2 for Paul. There were 2 delegate slots filled. They both were filled by Ron Paul supporters. We are also seeing the same trends in Minnesota, Nevada, and Iowa, and in Missouri as well. For this to stick, Paul activists have to show up at the next votes, small affairs, not much media happening in March, and control the delegate process. Then they have to show up at the convention and repeat it. This is actually doable. So that's a positive thing for anyone supporting Ron Paul and anyone who's believing in the message. You know, it's not just about supporting him, it's about believing in the message of what he has to say. He's not talking about anything that's out of the ordinary. He's talking about honoring the Constitution of the United States. That in itself should be what all the candidates are talking about. Unfortunately, they aren't, and it's only consistent with one candidate, Ron Paul. The Constitution should not be messed with, and those trying to mess with it, well, they're trying to destroy your liberty. Now, continuing on, we have another Ron Paul. One more, and this one is Judge Napolitano. Here we go.
Congressman Ron Paul is surging into second place in many national polls, showing his growing appeal. The Paul campaign is also claiming that it is winning the race for delegates. The campaign is confident it will pick up pluralities of delegates in caucus states like Iowa, Colorado, Nevada, and Minnesota. Question: is Congressman Paul winning? Joining me now to discuss is GOP strategist, good friend of the show, Jack Berkman. Jack, it's always a pleasure. Welcome.
Your Honor. Pleasure here.
Let me put to you the same question I just put to Doug Schoen. Can Ron Paul win the nomination without finishing first in any of the nominating processes, whether they are closed primaries where only Republicans can vote, open primaries where anybody can vote, or caucuses?
Yes. And I think you're already seeing him surge in national polls. I'll tell you what I think is very likely. I'll make you a bold prediction,
Go
Judge.
ahead.
I'll make a bold prediction right here and now, following what we've been saying for a year. Ron Paul is going to be on the Republican ticket, and I'll tell you why. I'll back that up. Last night establishes you now have 4 people who have the momentum to take this to the convention. Santorum's in, Gingrich is in, Romney and Paul are definitely in. 4 bodies are going to the convention. What that means is, and this goes into what I've argued for 6 months, we're going to see a brokered convention. The vote will be split up such that they will have to make a deal. The likely leader will be Romney, but he won't have enough delegates to win. Here's what happens.
Let me stop you, Jack. Are you telling me that it is not just fanciful, but it may actually happen that the name Paul is on the national ticket, maybe not in the first place?
Maybe not in the first place. I'm going further than that. I am now affirmatively predicting that Ron Paul will be on the ticket. I'll lay odds. If this were in London, Judge, I'd lay odds. We can lay odds on this. I'm saying this will likely happen, and here's why.
Go ahead.
When the vote is split up, let's say Romney gets 900 to Gingrich 600, Santorum 500, Paul 450, something like that. Romney will look at the field, and he will have to pick one of them as the VP in order to get the nomination. Gingrich and Santorum have extremely high negatives in a general election. Nobody in their right mind would want them on the ticket. Both of them, the negatives are so sky high. Santorum, you got to go. Who's left? It's Ron Paul.
It's a bold prediction, Jack. I'm not surprised to hear it from you. It's utterly tantalizing. We have to go. Thank you for joining us. We'll pick up on this the next time you're with us.
All right. Let's hope that works out, because it would be great to see. It'd be great for America. All right, moving right along. DHS, to launch Insurgent-Tracking drones inside America. Paul Joseph Watson. The Department of Homeland Security plans to spend up to $50 million on a spy system that had been used to hunt insurgents in Iraq and Afghanistan for the purpose of emergency and non-emergency incidents within the United States. The Department of Homeland Security is seeking 4 contractors to provide aerial remote sensing services using LIDAR, which is light detection and ranging, technology fitted to drones or manned aircraft that will provide surveillance capability for Homeland Security missions, as well as management of emergency incidents by Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, regional officers, joint field offices, and by state and local government. DHS believes these airborne images are essential for Homeland Security defense missions, such as planning for national security, special security events, Super Bowls, or national political conventions come to mind, enhancing border, port, and airport security, as well as performing critical infrastructure inventories and assessments, adding that the technology will be used for emergency and non-emergency accidents nationwide. The DHS expects successful contractors to ensure imagery can be acquired, processed, and delivered within 48 hours or less, and the ability to support simultaneous missions in multiple geographic locations. So basically, they want to spy on you even more. They want to put these drones out, and they want to spy upon you even more. And this next article here speaks to what's going on with the DHS. This time we got a group focuses. Congressional hearing on Big Sis, Twitter, and Drudge spying. Homeland Security is monitoring the web for anti-government sentiment and the signs of social unrest. This is by Steve Watson at InfoWars. A privacy advocacy group has swayed Congress to hold a hearing next week into the Department of Homeland Security's practice of monitoring social networks such as Twitter and Facebook, as well as media reports and organizations including the Drudge Report. The Electronic Privacy Information Center, otherwise known as EPIC, recently obtained close to 300 pages of documents as a result of the Freedom of Information Act lawsuit detailing the federal agency's intelligence gathering practices on the web. Among the documents were guidelines from the DHS instructing outside contractors to monitor the web for media reports and comments that reflect adversely on the agency or the federal government. As Reuters reported last month, in early 2010, contractors were asked to spend 24 hours monitoring news media coverage on popular websites, including Facebook, Twitter, Hulu, WikiLeaks, as well as news sites including Huffington Post and the Drudge Report. So continued spying, but it's good to know that there are groups out there that are keeping an eye. And what's it say that adversely? They're looking for reports that reflect adversely on the agency or federal government. Well, any report that comes out about you at spying, that is adverse against you. You're doing something wrong and you don't want people to know about it. So it's adverse to you, but not to the public. Now, this one here should wake up Americans, something to think about. Americans apparently approve of murder based on political party. A poll published on Wednesday by the Washington Post finds that a majority of even liberal Democrats approves of Obama killing U.S. citizens. Of course, that would almost certainly be different if Obama were a Republican. What if an organization with money but no partisanship, and there are some, were to commission a poll from a pollster willing to face a firestorm of attacks from the political parties? Are there any such pollsters? A poll that would ask people all their demographic info, including politics and party identification, if any, and ask them, some of them, if President Obama had to kill a U.S. citizen to protect the nation based purely on the word of the president, would you approve? If President had to imprison U.S. citizen with no trial to protect the nation based purely on the word of the president, would you approve? If President Obama had to launch a war without congressional authorization in order to protect the nation based purely on the word of the president, would you approve? And if President determined to be necessary to deploy a nuclear bomb and did so, would you approve? The poll would ask these questions of a large enough sample to be well represented in each demographic category. Then a similar sample would be asked the same question with Romney substituted for Obama. Then others would be asked the questions about a President Santorum with others Gingrich. The results would almost certainly show that many in the United States do indeed place loyalty political parties or elected officials above the matters of life and death, at least the lives and deaths of others. For all of those who think that killing like this should just be allowed, shame on you for thinking such a thing. Shame on you. Okay? Point to me in the Bible the commandment that God said, thou shalt kill, and then I shall understand a little bit more of your argument. But if you cannot produce such evidence, then you should not be supporting murderers. And in answer to any of these questions, if I was polled, the answer would be no, 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 and no. Obama, who has consistently lied, should not be the one who determines who's going to be killed or who's going to live. Based on that guy's decision, really? A man who has spent money to keep his record closed so people don't know who he really is? It's nonsensical, Americans. Got to think about this. You can't just think of killing people and accept that that's okay. Again, show me where God says to go kill, and I'll begin to understand a little bit more of where you're coming from. Very last story for today before we get into our meditation. I wanted to play this one here because this kid, well, I'm going to play this and you can hear it. This kid was kind of railroaded by his school because he painted a picture and they didn't like it. And I'm going to play it because the kid should have his due. It's a great picture, and here we go. Here we go. All right, I'm not hearing anything here, so let me just show you here. This kid had drawn a picture, and this is the image itself. Where's it at here? All right. I have a little trouble with some of the video here, but kid drew the picture, and it was said in there that these hands, his teacher or some representative thought that these hands were gang symbols, and therefore they determined that this kid's picture shouldn't be out there. And all he was doing was giving a tribute to heroes of 9/11 who rushed in, first responders, fire, police, emergency workers. The video goes on to say that the teacher did approve of these images and actually helped him to find the images so he could draw them. These are all drawn by a kid, a 15-year-old kid in school, who won the competition and later had that revoked. So I wanted you to see this picture. And unfortunately, I can't get the video working here so you could see who the idiots are that went ahead and said that this kid's picture was something that had gang-related issues to it. So again, kids are being railroaded in schools, and somebody needs to stand up for them. And it's not right. It isn't right. I'm telling you, it isn't right. All right, last but not least, it's time for us to do our meditation for today. So go ahead and close your eyes and relax. Close your eyes and relax. I want you to imagine that you were seated in a movie theater. And as you are seated in this movie theater that's packed with all sorts of other people, and you're watching the screen, I want you to imagine that what you see upon that screen is the story of life, the story of your life. And as you're watching the story of your life unfold on that screen, you realize that not only is this the story of your life, but is the story of the person who's sitting next to you and the person on the other side of you. As a matter of fact, you realize that everybody in the theater can relate because it is the story of their life. And as you watch and you connect with the events that are taking place, you're able to determine the lies that are presented there, the propaganda that is presented, for you know what is truthful in your life and what is not. And as you watch that screen, as you see what is going on, you're able to determine the difference between what is right and what is wrong. And as you leave the theater, going out into the world, you're able to understand a little better that life, like a movie, is filled with all sorts of information, some of it more pertinent than others. And our objective is to make and understand the difference between what is real and what is make-believe, so we do not get caught up in the lies that are made up, but we understand the truths that are inherent. Imagine that all of your chakras are activated, starting with the chakra at the bottom of the spine. The color is red, and raise the energy up to the chakra above it, orange. To the next chakra above that, yellow. To the heart chakra, green. Up to the throat, blue. To the third eye, violet, and the top of the head, indigo, and continuing up into the cosmos. You're connected above and below. Just feel the energetic connection, and from your heart chakra, send out love all around the world as a wave of green energy. Right from the green heart chakra, send that love out. Let's think a good thought for everybody around the planet, no matter who they are, friends and enemies alike. Love will make a difference. So send out love, wish everybody a good thought. And then let's bring our energy and attention back to the present moment on the count of 3. 3, coming back to the present moment filled with confidence. 2, coming back to the present moment filled with faith. And 1, coming back to the present moment happy, healthy, and whole. Happy, healthy, and whole. There you have it. That's the end of another show. As a matter of fact, that's the last show of our 500s. Tomorrow is our 600th show. Seems like almost yesterday when we just got started here, and things are just jamming right ahead. So I really appreciate, and Dirk really appreciates, taking the time each and every day to watch and participate. Thanks for the emails, comments, and so on and so forth. All that makes us happy. Anyway, have a great day. I'll be back tomorrow with more news and information. Till then, be safe. I'll talk to you soon. Peace. I'm out of here.